Hi, and welcome to my HTML and CSS for Beginners series. My name is Kevin, and this is a little bit of a long video compared to some of my other ones. We're looking at text properties and how to style our text using CSS, and there's a lot of different things we can do. I've tried just to stick to the big ones, the most important ones, but there are a lot. But I'm doing my best to make them ones that matter. These are the ones you need to know to really be able to handle your text properly, and typography is so important when in the world of web to actually make websites look good. So I try and show you, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and best practices for some things just to help you out and make your life a little bit easier. But I've already said this is a long video and this is turning into a long intro, so let's just get to it. So as you can see here, I've set up, we have our pages like we did before, but I gave us a new page here just with a few paragraphs on it, an H1 at the top right here, styling text, and an H2 with a little, it's my little subtitle with the paragraphs here underneath. So I'm going to jump over to my CSS because this is where all the real magic is going to happen in this video. We've already looked at a little bit of styling text in our previous videos. We've changed font sizes and we've changed colors. In this video, we're going to be doing a whole bunch of other stuff. Before we really get into this, I just want to say I'm only looking at the basics of styling text. I'm not going to dive really deep into it. There's lots and lots and lots of font properties that we can modify, and I really don't want to overwhelm you at this point. A lot of them are for some extra stuff that right now, it would just be like, why is he showing me this? I'm never going to remember it. The other thing is, at first, because there are so many properties, it can be a little bit overwhelming. And it can seem like you're never going to remember them all. I teach HTML and CSS to classes, and so when we're in class, some of my students, sometimes they're just, when I'm first introducing these things, they're overwhelmed. They go, there's no way I'm going to remember this, and within a day of doing it, it's second nature. Repetition, 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 and you'll have it down pat. So, if you're watching me do this and going, holy crap, there's too much, you practice a little bit and you'll be surprised at how fast you remember it all. So with that out of the way, let's jump to it. The first thing I want to talk about is font families and something we call font stacks. So when you first put in text, I never told this what font we want to use. I have a font size and I have colors set up here, but I've never told it what font family I wanted to use. And obviously it has to render text and it's just going to a system default. Some systems will have different defaults. So right now this is going to look different on different computers. And I don't even know what it's going to look like on other computers. Is it a serif? Is it a sans serif? Probably all serif fonts just like it is now, but you can't be sure. It depends on the person's computer, the system defaults and all of that. So it's usually a good idea to say what font you actually want to be using. So I'm going to come up here in my body. If we remember because everything is in my body, any styles I put on here cascade down and apply to everything inside of it. So if I come here, and I've already done this before, but font family sans serif. I'm going to save that, and it turns into a sans serif font. And in this case, it's the font Arial because I'm on a PC, and if I was on a Mac, it would probably be Helvetica. So if you're working on a Mac, it might look a little different, but you should have a sans serif font. But, it's kind of boring just saying serif or sans serif. What if we want to do something, what if you actually want to choose what font you want to use? Well, we have to be a little bit careful with that. We can't use any font. You might have gone to a website and downloaded some really cool looking font. You can't just use any font like that. You need to use fonts that somebody else has on their computer as well. So as an example, let's switch this over to Calibri. That's a font. I'm going to save that and refresh, and that's turned into Calibri now. The only problem is Calibri is a system font on PCs, and not all Macs come with Calibri. So if I did Calibri like that, it might not work on a Mac. It's possible, some Macs obviously will have it, but there's a good chance that it doesn't actually work. And if it doesn't work, it could fall to a, let's come up with a font that is popular on Macs, but which isn't popular on PCs, like Futura. I don't have Futura on my computer. Most Macs come with Futura as a font on their computer. So if you're on a Mac and you try that, it will probably look like Futura, which is a sans serif font. You can see it's looking like my default. If I don't even have a font family now, and I save that, it looks exactly the same. Because my computer can't find Futura, it's just not working. I can't use it, and I can't see anything. And well, that sucks, because I really don't want it to look like this. So to stop problems like this from happening, we use something called a font stack, which means I can say Futura, put a comma, and then I can come down and say sans serif. And what this is going to do is, if Futura doesn't work, my computer can't find Futura, it's going to just go and default over to another, whatever the system default sans serif is. So Futura is not working, but it's going over to Arial, which is my default sans serif font on my computer. But, you know, it's annoying trying to figure out the whole font stacks, because in general you don't want just, if Futura doesn't load, sans serif comes in. You can actually get quite complete with your font stacks. The other thing that you might not be too sure about are what fonts I have on my computer are system fonts and what are fonts that other people might not have. So I'm going to give you guys a link. It's in the description below, and it's a super handy site called cssfontstack.com. And it does exactly what you think it would. It's pretty much groups things, serif font, sans serif, serif, monospaced, fantasy, and script. And the cool thing about this is it tells you what computers are running on the font. So if you take Arial, for example, well, pretty much every system is running Arial. 99% of Windows computers and 98% of Macs have it. Whereas if you go with some font like Avant-Garde, well, only 1% of all computers are even using Avant-Garde. So you probably won't have someone, maybe that's not your best bet. In general, you want to pick a font that most people are going to see, because you want to make sure that the site actually, people are seeing the font you chose. But the nice thing about this, let's go with Calibri here, where I have most Windows computers have it, but not all of them, and some Macs have it. So it's a pretty safe one. And I just click this little icon right here, and it's going to copy that onto my page. We'll minimize that down, and I'm going to delete that. Oh, it took the whole thing. Okay, delete even the font family, and just hit Command V to paste. And you can see I'm going to stretch this out to show you the whole stack that it gave me. So it's doing Calibri. And if Calibri doesn't load, it's going to do Candara. And if Candara doesn't load, it's going to do Segui. And if that doesn't load, Segui UI. If that doesn't load, Optima. If Optima doesn't work, Arial. And God forbid Arial doesn't work, it's going to go to the system default sans serif font. And the idea here is, if Calibri doesn't load, find something really, really similar to it. So this is the closest font they have to it. And if that doesn't load, let's go to the next closest. And if that doesn't load, let's go to the next closest and the next closest. And eventually we give up and just say, okay, make sure you're a sans serif. You'll also notice here there's some differences in coloring, and more importantly, this one here is in quotation marks. Basically, when you're writing out your fonts, if it's one word, so Calibri, one word, you can just write Calibri. If the font has more than one word in it, one font that most of you probably know is Times New Roman. So we can't just write Times New Roman. It gets confused. You see even the coloring of it's off and everything. So you just have to put it in quotation marks if you're choosing a font that is more than one word, and everything will be fine. And those quotation marks can also be single, so single or double quotation marks, as long as it's the same, not a single at the start and a double at the end. It's either single or double. And so I don't want it to be Times New Roman. We're going to go with Calibri and save that, and I'll come back and refresh. And there we go. Now let's shrink this back down so we can see my page at the same time. Just like with font size, we can overwrite things, our color. So for example, my color here on my body is this dark color, but my H1 is using this brighter blue. I can come onto my H1 and say, I want a different font family. Actually, let's come back. to CSS font stack.com. And let's pick another one. I'm going to go with a let's go with a slab serif and see what happens. And refresh, and there we go. My slab serif comes in. So my H1 is using that font, and over here we have my Calibri on my other fonts there. Now another thing you'll notice is there's a lot of spacing that's automatically here. And that spacing is automatically put on all of our text. So all of our headings have a spacing and all of our paragraphs have a spacing. And the way all of those spaces are created is with margin top and margin bottom. So if you remember, margin creates empty space around things. We're pushing things away. So by putting a margin on the top and bottom, it's creating spaces around it. And it's usually, for pretty much all of them except the H1, equal to the font size. So this space here is roughly the same or exactly the same as the font size. H1's it's a little bit less, but more or less just think whatever the default is, whatever my font size is the space between. So I see that I have a really big space here and I don't really like that space. So I can come on to my H1 and I can say that the margin bottom is 0 pixels. I'm going to save that and hit refresh, and they get a little bit closer together, but it's clearly not 0. And the reason for that is there's no margin left on my H1 here. There's no space underneath, but my H2 here has a space on the top still. So all of my text has a margin top and a margin bottom by default. So what I can come down and do is now my H2. So I'm going to select my H2. I'm going to choose the margin top this time and put that one to 0. And I'll do pixels for consistency and hit refresh. And now they're pretty much stuck together. Now I'm not saying that's the best thing to do, but I just want to show you that the spacing is always caused by the margins. So just for fun, if I go to my paragraph, so I'm going to select my paragraphs and say margin bottom. Let's just do 50 pixels for fun. Save. It will create bigger spaces between my margins. And if I make that 10 pixels, I get smaller spaces, except I still have my margin top. And I'll do margin top 0 pixels. The reason I'm doing 0 on the top is right now, let's just delete that for a second. My margin bottom is 10, so my margin bottom is very small, but this paragraph here still has a big margin on the top. So I'm going to take the margin top off all my paragraphs, and this is something that's pretty standard to do. You just remove the margin top so you can control your spaces with just the margin bottom. There we go. So I have a small space. If I move that up to 20, I have a bigger space, and if I bring it all the way up to 50, I have a much bigger space. So for now, let's just bring that back down to 20 pixels. So we were just looking at the space between our paragraphs, but what about the space between our lines? Now, anyone who's coming from a print background or a design background probably knows the space between our lines in that world is called leading. In the web world, it's a little bit different. The name of it's different, and the way it functions, same purpose function we'll get into a little bit later, but it's pretty straightforward, and it's called line height. And I don't want to do that on my H1 actually, we want to do that on our paragraphs. Let's just bring that there. So on my paragraphs, line height. So this is, let's just say this is 40 pixels. And I'm going to come here and refresh, and now there's a really big space between my lines. The way line height is calculated is it looks at the middle of a line. So I'm going to start the middle of this line, and it's like right in the middle of the letters, and it's going to put 20 pixels on the top and 20 pixels down on the bottom. That's how it works. It equally distributes it from the center of the text, 20 pixels top, 20 pixels bottom, to give me a 40 pixel line height. Works much like leading does in the end, even though the calculation of it's a little bit different. So if you're copying a Photoshop file or something, the leading number and the line height will match up. So the bigger I make my line height, the more space I have, and the smaller I make my line height, the less space between my lines have. So now they're sort of crushing up against each other. Now you can do this in a pixel value if you want, but I much prefer doing it just as without a unit. So if I just do 1 and I save that, it's going to make my line height equal to my font size. So right now my font size is 21 pixels that we put up on our body. Line height of 1 means that it's the exact same thing. So the lines are a little too close together. In general, a line height of 1 doesn't work well until you're in big font sizes or all cap text. But 1, and then so if I do 1.25, I'll get a little bit more space. If I jump that all the way up to 2, I'll start getting double spacing, which looks ugly as well. So in general, we want to use something between 1 and 2. 1's usually too small unless you have very big fonts, in which case you might want to start using it. And 2 is, generally speaking, too big. So let's just do 1.4 for now. And that looks pretty nice. Just go based on what looks good, especially when you're just learning it. The next couple ones are a bit easier to remember, and they all go with the font group. So we have font, and you guys know font size already. Let's just change this so we can see it. Whoops. So we can see it change. So my fonts get bigger or smaller. So we have font size. Another one that we have, and the nice thing, just to jump back to line height, now that I changed my font size, the line height changed with it because it's 1.4. If this had been, say, 25 pixels before, let's delete that, save. So that doesn't look too bad, it's looking okay. But if I change my font size to 30 pixels now, you'll see that the line height isn't very good anymore. The letters are starting to get smushed together a bit. So another reason to just go with things like 1.4, 1.5, or whatever number you want without a pixel value, just so if you do change the font size, the line height automatically changes with it. So yeah, we've seen font size, and you'll also notice when I'm doing font, I'm getting all of these things, and I'm not going to get into all of them because there's just a bunch here, and a lot of them are very obscure. So I'm going to show you the big ones. There's font style, whoops, and you might use a font style. We have italic, makes my text italic. You also have oblique, and you'll notice a small change there. So let's just undo this. I'm going to save. I'm going to hit refresh, but look at my text while I do this. You'll notice a small change there. You might notice a bigger difference with serif fonts. In general, you won't really use oblique as much as italic. Oblique is sort of a fake italic, sort of. Designers out there might be yelling at me a little bit, but just figure oblique's a bit like a fake italic, whereas italic is a real one. It's usually a nicer option, and if there is no italic version, it can go to an oblique anyway. Just use italic. If you want italic text, you want your text tilted over a little bit, font style italic, and you'll get your italic. Nice and easy. We have font weight, and you'll see here bold, so that probably does what you expect it to. You probably also saw there was bolder, and that should look probably the same right now. Bolder's a weird one. What it's going to do is take whatever current font weight you have and make it one step bolder than it was. And the reason for that is there is a font, there's light and lighter. So light, normal, and I don't have a light version of this font. Let's try lighter. Whoops, I don't think the lighter is going to work because I don't think there's a lighter version of this font. Oh, there you go. See, I got a little bit thinner. So if this was my default and then I had something in here that was set to bolder, it wouldn't go to bold, it would just go to the normal. And then using bold, it actually gets bold. Let's show you what I'm actually talking about here. Let's put a span. Span class equals bolder. And close span, and let's find another one here. Span class equals bold, and close span. Save. So let's come here now. So bolder, font weight, bolder, That's it. And bold will be a font weight of bold. And what I did here, just to jump back for 1 second, I used spans, which we looked at briefly before, and I gave each of my spans a different class. So I have my bold class and my bolder class, and I'm selecting those in my CSS with my period. So my period is my class bolder, and then I have my period bold. So my class of bold and my class of bolder, and I'm changing their font weights. So I'll save that and I'll refresh, and they're right here. So this one, so if you remember, our font weight is set to lighter. So light means sort of skinnier. And you can see here that this one is the normal font. It's not bold. This is my bold, and this is just going back to the normal. So bolder means 1 step bolder than we currently are, whereas bold just means bold. It doesn't matter. It's going to jump all the way up to the bold. When we do our font weight, I'm not going to, font weight, whoops, didn't. There's also the normal, which is just what you'd expect it to be. There's all these numbers. And I'm going to get into those in another look when taking a look at Google Fonts. And until we get to there, we don't really have to worry about the numbers. But just in case you're curious, something to look forward to. We've seen font family already as well, which is what we use to choose what font we want to use. So now we have one last little batch of ones that I want to show you guys. And just to confuse you, the first ones are all dealing with font, and the next ones all start with text hyphen. So I'm going to start with text align, because most people know what that is. And let's just do a text align center, refresh, and my text becomes centered. And I can do a text align right, and my text will become right aligned. And my last option is text align justify. And text align justify will justify my text. But as a word of warning, justified text in the world of web, it doesn't look so good. We don't have hyphenation like we do in the world of print. So depending on your screen size, and font size, you'll start getting these really big spaces between some words. I've seen this on my phone so many times, and it drives me bonkers. There's a lot of people working really hard at finding ways of improving justified text online, but for the time being, just don't use it, please. It's just not a good idea. Just don't do it. Don't justify your text. Another one is text decoration. So text decoration. Actually, let's put these on my spans, because these will make more sense on my spans than through whole paragraphs. So text decoration, I'm going to do line through. And that puts a line through, sort of like crossing out the word. I also have underline. Does what you'd think it would. It underlines my text. Underlined text can look ugly. You can see the line is passing through the G there. There's not much we can do about that. Underline. I also have overline, which I don't see used very often, but it does exist, where you can put lines on top of things. And I do believe that's it. So we have those 3 options. For my text decoration. I also have a text transform, and I love text transform. Here's all the options we have for it. We can capitalize our text, we can do lowercase text, we can do uppercase text, or just no transformation. There's also this full width one in here. It's actually, I don't think it's actually been fully implemented yet, and from what I've looked into it, it doesn't really apply to anything we'll be doing. So, yeah, I don't think you'll ever, if you try using it, it probably won't work right now anyway. And unless you're dealing with other languages using different characters, I don't think it really applies to what you'll need to worry about. Looking at some of these other ones, capitalize will capitalize your text. And people sometimes make capitalize, it's just taking the first word. And let's make that span have 2 words in it instead of just 1. And it capitalizes each word. So the first word will get a capital letter on it. If you want the whole thing to be uppercase, which is usually what people are after, it's text align, text transform, uppercase, and then the whole thing will become capital. So just a quick, 2 little differences there, and people mix those up all the time. And you can also do a lowercase, so if you have uppercase text, you can force it to be lowercase. So as I mentioned, there are actually a lot more properties out there that we can modify with our text, but these are the big ones. Our text alignment, our font size, our font family, our font style for when you need a little bit of italic text or bold text, our text alignment. We have our font weight, our text decoration, our text transform, and that covers most of the bases. And don't forget the spacing between things is done with margin top and bottom. As far as this video goes, that's it. As I mentioned, there are other properties that are out there. These aren't the only ones that exist, but these are the big ones. So just a really fast recap, the space between all of our text is always done with a margin top or margin bottom. The space between our lines is done with our line height. And then we have all our font properties. So we have our font size, our font style, and our font weight, as well as our font family. I really encourage you to use cssfontstack.com. Again, that's down in the description. It will, it's a lifesaver, this one, if you're going after, you want to know what people actually have and to come up with reliable stacks. It's a really nice site to use. And then we have all of our text properties. So we have our text align, so if you want to change your alignment of your text, right align, left align, as well as our text decoration for putting lines through, lines on top, or lines underneath. And last but not least, we have our text transform that lets us turn stuff into uppercase text without having to retype it and make a really embarrassing typo. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Hit the like button if you liked the video. If you've made it this far, I'm guessing you liked it because this was a bit of a long one. If you've made it around this far too, please leave a comment down below and let me know you actually made it the whole way through, because I think that's a bit of an achievement with a long video like this one. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.